Okay, to set up the Innoledy gouging machine, you're going to need a table with a square edge like that, and that is so you can clamp it onto the table. So this crank is going to have to go on the outside of the machine facing towards you. So you're going to look for this and clamp it down to the table. The next thing you're going to do is lift the lever here and make sure this wheel here is turned all the way to the left. So you're going to turn this away from you. And then, just for now, lock the blade. So this lever here, if you loosen it and pull it towards you, it unlocks the blade. And if you tighten it or push it down, it locks the blade. But whenever you're turning this wheel, you want to make sure that this is in the unlocked position. The next thing you're going to do is take this micrometer here. Now there's a little screw here. You can loosen that and adjust the wheel here and adjust the dial. You're going to want to make sure this is set on 0 and then tighten this screw gently. The next thing you're going to do is put the dial into place. So first you're going to loosen this screw and then slip that in. And you want to make sure that pin is just barely touching the platform here. So you could potentially push this up or down, but you want to make sure this is all the way at the top and that this reads 0. And then you're going to want to tighten this screw here. So this dial indicator here shows you the center measurement of your gouge. So right now I have it on 0. Now when you get your Innoledy gouging machine, it should come with a post-it note because this dial indicator is not necessarily going to be completely accurate. For example, I think mine's off by about 0.03 millimeters or 300ths of a millimeter. So if I want to get a finished gouge at, let's say, 0.6 in the middle, I'm actually going to have this read at 0.7 at the very end. These Innoledy gouging machines come with an extra dial indicator. So this one will be correct. So you just want to compare the measurements you get from this to that one. The next thing you can do is take the crank and put it on here. So you're just looking for this part here. I think they've redesigned these cranks recently so that they just slip on, but mine comes with a little tightening screw here. Next, this will be the pusher. So I'm just going to leave this right here. There's a hole for that to go through, but I'm just going to leave it there for now. The next thing you're going to do to set up your gouging machine is you're going to look for these two little pins here. They are attached to these rollers, and I like to make sure that these rollers are flat on the bed, just to make sure that these two pins are as close to each other as possible, which makes putting on the spring a little bit more easy. So make sure that you only have the spring on the machine when you're using it. If you leave the spring on overnight, it can just get stretched out too much, and these things are kind of hard to replace. So I have my dial indicator and blade set to 0, meaning this dial is pushed all the way to the left and this is at 0. So the next thing I'm going to do is unlock the blade by pulling this up. And I'm going to do about 4 pass-throughs with each piece of cane, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But for my first one, I like to have it read about 1.1 in the middle or 1.05 or so. So in the unlocked position, I'm going to turn this dial towards me, and you'll see the indicator going up. So I have the dial indicator set at 1.1, meaning the dial has done a full revolution through 1 and is at 0.1 now. Then I'm going to lock the blade by pushing that down, and I'm ready to do my first pass through. So the blade is locked and this lever is pushed down back here. This is reading 1.1, and then I'm just going to gently lift up this to be able to place a piece of pre-gouged cane into the bed. And then with this crank and this pusher, I'm just going to have it run through. Here's the chip that came off, so I just like to take that off before I gouge the next piece. So I'm going to lift that up just slightly, place the piece of cane in the bed, Now, with this pusher, I'm almost reluctant to even say this because it's such a small point, but we're going to be pushing it that way, but also try to make sure that you're lifting it up just a little bit. Pushing this up just a little bit, just make sure that you'll be pushing the piece of cane through and that the pusher doesn't accidentally go above the piece of cane. So like I did before, just going to crank it through. And to remove this chip here, I'm just going to push this right here, just slightly, just enough to be able to remove the chip. I like to have a paintbrush around, and this has very soft bristles, just to remove any excess dust or excess cane that lands on the machine. Next thing is we're going to gouge it a little bit thinner now, so I'm going to unlock the blade, push this away, and I'm going to set it at 0.8 in the middle, and then I'm going to lock the blade. Make sure before you gouge your cane that you always have this in the locked position, otherwise the cane could get jammed inside the blade and it's really hard to pull out and could potentially damage the blade. So I'm going to take these same two pieces of cane, place them in the bed like I did before, and crank them through. So now this piece of cane will read about 0.8 in the middle. So I'm going to do 2 more pass-throughs with these 2 pieces of cane. So I'm going to unlock the blade, and for my second to last pass-through, I'm going to set it at 0.1 higher than what I want my final center gouge measurement to read. So I usually gouge my cane to be 0.58 in the middle. That's a little bit thinner than what most people do. Most people do about 0.6. So I want this dial indicator to read about 0.1 or 0.08 higher than what I want my final measurement to be. And then I'm going to lock the blade by pushing this lever down and do the second to last pass through. Just like before, just going to lift this up just enough to get the piece of cane into the bed. Crank it through. And do the other piece of cane. So your Innoledy gouging machine should come with a little post-it note that says just how much this dial indicator is off by. So this is a good spot to double check this reading against what it's actually going to be in the middle. So right now I have the dial indicator set at 0.64 in the middle, so I'm just going to double check against this to see what it's actually coming out as. And this says, I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but this says 0.66 in the middle, it looks like. And when you're measuring your piece of cane, you want to make sure that it's lying flat and not dropping down like that, otherwise you'll get a thicker reading than what it actually is. And you want to make sure you're getting a measurement in the center of the piece of cane. So this dial indicator is giving me a reading of 0.02 millimeters thicker than what this dial indicator is reading. So if I want my pieces of cane to have a center measurement of 0.58, I'm actually going to set this to 0.56. So I'm going to unlock the blade like I did before, set this to 0.56, lock the blade, and this will be the final pass through for each of these pieces of cane. Another small thing is that if you can't tug out the piece of cane too easily, you can just leave it in and the second piece of cane that you gouge will just push it straight out. I'm going to double check my final measurements. So the center is reading exactly 0.58, so that's perfect for me. And this one's reading 0.59, but I'm going to call that close enough. So keep in mind that I was gouging with dry pieces of cane and measuring with dry pieces of cane. So when I soak this for about half an hour before I tie it on, the center measurement is actually going to swell up to about 0.6 or even 0.61. So just keep that in mind with these measurements, that when it's soaked, it's actually going to swell up just a little bit. And to put my machine away, I'm going to leave it set up. The only thing I'm going to do is just remember to take off the spring, and I'm going to use that paintbrush and just dust off any little shards of cane that are still on it.